There we go.
Buenos dias. Ooh, we gotta clean that lens, baby. Good. Also just cleaned off my credenza because I didn't realize how. Oh, shut that. Looks like. Hold on. What is open? Oh, that's you. It looked like one of my cabinets was open back there, but it's your back. I'm like, I was like, man, I didn't get much sleep last night. I thought I was really losing it though with that mess.
That's funny.
I
Did it
suppose
tell?
I
Go
suppose
ahead.
I suppose we're not live on the cast yet with all my
No, we're not live. We should be recording it though, so
yeah, it's great. Good times. Just don't post that much.
we'll edit it down. So well, let's jump in. We can kind of start walking through it. Did it tell you it was recording, by the way?
It did. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, we can jump in. We can kind of get going because this is one of those I was excited about. I'm a big, you know, I'm real big on mental function and mental health because, when we started looking through all the gut issues, what I started finding out was that, we can get the celiac, we can get a lot of the gut issues to calm down, but until we fix that sympathetic drive that is pushing people into that stress function and shutting off gut, we're never going to get all the way there. And so, going through stress function, trying to figure out, okay, how do we deal with our psychological stress has been a really, really big piece of it. And it's shocking to me how few people, when I'm like, have you have a therapist? You talking to anybody? You ask people like, hey, mental health is important. Like we agree on almost nothing, but we all agree that mental health is important. And people go, yep, yep. And I go, well, what are you doing for it? And they go, nothing. So like, kind of walk us through like the type of people who need to go see therapist, counselor, mental coach, like anything like that. What are the types of things that you see and that people need to come get work on?
Sure. Well, I think the first obstacle is that most people have partitioned off mental health from health, and instead of looking at the body systemically as a whole system, that mental health and mental stability and wellness as part of and an integral part of, um, we look at that as a society as a completely different thing. Um, then there's also the obstacles of we'll talk about men seeking mental health help later, but that's a whole different animal. But yeah, I think you and I are well aligned in that if you treat the body as a complete um, as a system rather than these separate parts, everybody wins. Additionally, we've operated even from a um, psychiatric standpoint from the medical model for many years, where you have a symptom, you go to the doctor and you treat it, usually with something that's varying degrees of effective or ineffective. And then, we treat whatever side effects come from that medication with a different medication. And then before you know it, a lot of people that hit my office are on 4 to 5 psych meds. Um, one treating the initial symptom, and then it just becomes a domino of other medication to treat the what's going on here. Um, I think if again if we look at things holistically, it's a win-win, and using things like encouraging people to exercise. I know that's a crazy thought. Physical activity is one of the best antidepressants out there. Um,
I think the most research that's been done on depression has been, shows that exercise is the number one way to cure or to treat depression.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. But it's one of the hardest things, obstacles to overcome and get people to do, because as you can imagine, a lot of these symptoms of depression are the exact opposite of the possible cure. For example, when people are depressed, they want to be sedentary. They want to stay inside. They want to be inactive. They don't want to reach out to their social support network. Whereas the opposite of those three things, being active, getting outside in green spaces and outdoors and moving, and engaging with a social support network are integral parts of combating depression.
So if we're looking at somebody who's trending more depressed, let me ask you this way. If we have these kids who are sitting inside on their cell phones and their video games and with their high fructose corn syrup cereal, not doing stuff, are we looking at creating, and I don't know if we can legally diagnose why I say this, are we creating, let me ask you this way, are we creating the environment to trend towards depression by doing those things?
Absolutely, and also that's a whole nother soapbox of social media and TikTok and Instagram. You know, they're constantly bombarded with a feed, and a lot of these things are, you know, some of them are positive and helpful, but some of it's complete garbage. And it actually, we've seen here at our clinic, Frisco Counseling and Wellness, a huge uptick in kids. We'll just say kids sub 25. I'm going to go ahead and incorporate 25 and under because we've got a lot of 20 to 25-year-olds functioning as children, living at home, still not launching and leaving the nest and being completely dependent on parents, which, as you can imagine, is also very depressive.
Mm-hmm.
But they're bombarded with this garbage that really propagates diagnoses. I see kids come in my office and you know they want a diagnosis. They're like, well, hey, do you think I have, you know, and they pick some wild ones, right? Do I have, you know, you can tell they've done their research. Do I have generalized anxiety disorder, or do I have true obsessive compulsive disorder? And I'm like, no, you just need to go hang out with your friends and get outside and, you know, get off the console and touch grass. Uh, so and you know that's not denying that there are true mental um, illnesses or psychiatric diagnoses that absolutely can be you know, children, kids or adults can benefit from some of these meds. I just think I'm going to make a pretty brazen statement. It's almost like a 90-10 rule. Um, 90% of those could be, you know, they could do things to either help their medication work better and more effectively, or I've seen kids that, you know, are adults that change their lifestyle and they don't need the medication that they were on anymore.
I
Uh,
see that a lot. I see that a lot here. We'll bring people in and people will be like, "Oh, I'm depressed," and we'll pull their testosterone. Like your testosterone is a third of what it should be. You have, your gut flora is all messed up, so you're not producing any serotonin. And so we change their diet and we get them moving a little bit, get them the testosterone. All of a sudden, everything's fine. And so, there's a lot of that. I think that one of the big problems is that the access to information that these kids have now is unbelievable, which is great, which is good and bad because I love psych and I'm watching Dr. Peterson's stuff on Peterson University or Peterson Academy, and I was watching the thing on narcissism, and I'm like, man, if you were to watch that and not understand the parameters of it, you'd be like, I'm a narcissist because like I like to be out with people and I say things and I do things and I like myself, so I must be a narcissist. And it's like the difference is like you're a four, like you like who you are. The actual narcissists are the tens. And so I think a lot of these people, like you said, with the generalized anxiety disorder, they're like, well, I have some of those things, so that must be me. I'm just broken. I need medication, instead of I need to change my lifestyle. And so that's going to be really fun for you to have to deal with all that stuff with these kids coming in with all this info.
well, they want to wear it as a badge, right? There's even, I don't know if you're aware, but there's something called menu anxiety. And menu anxiety is an actual thing. If you don't believe me, check TikTok or whatever social media networks are out there that you're on, and it's actually not being able to figure out what you want to order on a menu. And you know, my personal opinion, I guess it's professional opinion too. That's insane. Um, and but it's, you know, they're that this thing they see a TikTok about it. It's almost like they want to wear that as a badge, and it's a, well, okay, well, you have this. Oh yeah, I can commiserate with you because I have this. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's I don't know that that's a real thing.
Yeah, not being able to figure out what you want to eat. I think that's one of those, we call that the first world problems. Like, there's so
Yeah.
many great things on a menu, you can't figure out which one you want. Well, that's, you know,
If that's your concern of the day, I don't feel too bad. I kind of I mean maybe I experience that. Sometimes I'm like, hey, could you come back around? Like I want to make sure I see everything on the menu and pick the absolute best thing because I love to eat and it's I don't want to pick the wrong thing. So maybe I've got it too, Doc.
well, and it's kind of funny because people ask me all the time. They're like, is this therapy? Is this the therapy I need? And it's kind of funny because I think that we've also blurred the lines on therapy now that now that buying a sweater is retail therapy.
Really.
I think that we've kind of broken down the idea of what exactly are we looking for therapy wise. But I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, is compounded by the fact that we don't communicate very well. I think that is the biggest issue. Like we have these feelings, we don't communicate very well, and I think that's one of the things we see the most with relationship issues. And so, like you do a lot of relationship stuff. So, like, what are we typically seeing? What do you think? Because everyone says it's sex and finance. What are the things that drive relationships sideways? That you guys are seeing.
Man, that's such a loaded question. Yeah, so I do believe that what we have here is a failure to communicate, and that's the demise of most relationships. I would add into sex and money. I always say, the John Gottman, who I use a lot of his work, he says money, sex, and kids. So if we're gonna argue, fuss, and fight, it's gonna be either about money and how we spend money and allocation of resources. And usually we've got a spender and a saver. And it's kind of like that. If we've got two spenders, that usually doesn't work out very well, and two savers, that's just not very much fun. So
Yeah.
uh, sex is generally the difference in libido. Um, and things can start out amazing, hot and heavy, and then we get 5 years in and have a couple of kids and stress. And I think it's a function of our lives being way too full and not taking time to invest in our partner and what's important. um, and then parenting. I mean, geez, parenting's not for the faint of heart. I've got three of them myself, and to think that my wife and I would agree on every parenting issue, whether it's empowering versus enabling, or how much access to have to social media or iPhones. Kids getting iPhones at 6 years old now, right? You're putting a lot of dangerous things and way too much access in their hand. So to think that we would agree on all that stuff is just is kind of silly. Um, but yeah, I think at the core is communication. And if one thing we do is we teach couples how to communicate. We break things down. And if even using like test discussions or test arguments or issues, if you will, because if we can make sure not to use any information here that's incriminating to anyone, but if we can engage and resolve the issue of how we're going to spend Christmas, for example,
Hmm.
right? You've got two people that have always done things the same way. They get married. Couples are getting married much later now, so they're much more entrenched in how they do Christmas. And lo and behold, we've got two people who both families and extended families do Christmas on Christmas Day noon or Christmas Eve dinner or something. I mean, you got to resolve that. And if we can resolve that, we can resolve things like parenting and sex and uh, finance. So using a small case, I mean, that's actually not a small case. Christmas is a big deal, and everyone can appreciate that as we're up, coming up on that season. But how we spend our holidays, if we can figure that out, man, we can resolve. If you have those core principles of communication, we can resolve anything.
So you guys actually sit down and come up with like, hey, here's an argument you guys aren't really having, but let's walk through this like it was real, and like kind of teach communication off of that.
Yeah, sometimes it's easier to use a hypothetical because it's not emotionally charged, right?
Hmm.
If it's an argument that they've butted heads on for 9 of the last 8 arguments, right? It's like that they're coming to the table hot already.
Yeah.
And if we can come to the table on an issue that's like, where are we going to eat for lunch, rather than, you know, I don't want to see my mother-in-law or father-in-law, or your cousin or your sister, or because she's a whatever else, like that's too hot to start out on. And most people, most humans, most couples that I work with a lot of couples, just don't know how to communicate. They've never learned how to communicate, and that's only becoming worse and worse with several things: social media, um, isolation during COVID. I think we are only beginning to see the full impact and the ramifications of um, the impact that that's having on that generation, especially school age children that were.
Hmm.
You're at the core of learning socialization and how to communicate with other humans, and they were a lot of them were stuck inside for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
um, Not only that, how to communicate and engage with the opposite sex, right? And we've got kids that are, they'll come in my office. I work with a lot of couples, and I work with a lot of families with teenage and young adult children. They'll come in my office and tell me they've got a girlfriend, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Tell me about your girlfriend. And they'll tell me all about her, and I'm like, well, when did you first meet her? And I'm like, okay. So they'll tell me when they met her, and then it comes. I ask enough questions, and I've been doing this long enough, about 25 years actually, that something starts sounding fishy. And the girlfriend is in Idaho, and they've actually never met the girlfriend, but that's been their girlfriend for a whole year, right?
Hmm.
So completely online, not touching or engaging, real people. I think is pretty detrimental to building human interactions and relationships also.
That's one of those things I talk about a lot, like, and I have this crazy weird idea that we should stop teaching trig and stuff like that in school and start teaching interpersonal communication, EQ, things
You've
like
got a
that.
calculator. I mean, you've got a calculator.
Yeah. Like, I told somebody the other day, I was like, there's no reason for our kids to be learning all 50 states and all 50 capitals because we can Google that whenever we want to. But, what we're not learning is how do I communicate with the person over there? That they have different thoughts and ideas than I do. How do we have a conversation without getting too entrenched and too tribal? Like, I think we should be teaching that instead of, like I said, some of the higher order, math and stuff like that, which if you want to go be an engineer or go to college and learn that stuff, that's great. But we got to teach people how to function. And I don't think we're teaching that at all.
Well, I agree with you on the math, and I disagree on the geography because that's a personal hotspot. I think geography is not being taught, and it is just a personal vendetta of mine that my kids know geography and they know east and west. And I can't tell you how many adults hit my office, and I'm like, well, we're just west of the tollway on Lebanon. But I don't know which way that is. I'm like, oh. So yeah, I agree mostly with that, but I do think geography is important. But to your point, yeah, you can Google it, sure.
I see a lot of people who are really stuck. There's the new, apparently the new DSM diagnosis, which I think is a big umbrella, is the devoid or lack of purpose. People who are, they're finding out that they're not really depressed, they're not really this or that. They have no purpose. They have no path to walk. Because there's so many things that life has gotten pretty easy for a lot of people. Are you seeing any of that type of stuff? Are you seeing like people who are just like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what the purpose is. Like, what is there to do for me, or what am I supposed to be here for? Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, overwhelmingly, yes. I usually recommend a book. It's called A Man's Search for Meaning. It's by Viktor Frankl. He was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he then after that invented or founded existential therapy, which is therapy about finding meaning in your life. And I do believe wholeheartedly that if you wake up in the morning and you have something that you're connected to, that you find value in or find meaning in, it's a game changer for depression. or anxiety, or really most of these psychiatric um, diseases or illnesses. And on top of that, getting outside yourself. We live in a very egocentric world. It's all about us. It's all about, let me post this. And I'm beating on social media. I'm really not anti-social media. I just think there's a lot of bad and negative out there, and there's way too much of it and way too many hours spent on it. But what can I post? Well, do I need to post between 7 and 7:47 p.m. so I get the most likes or whatever that looks like? It's all about seeking that approval from an external source who you may not even know and never met, rather than getting up and making a difference in your
Hmm.
community, making a difference in your world. And when we get outside of ourselves, a lot of times I encourage people to volunteer, right? Because it's very difficult to breathe. You talk about first world problems, and here, especially in the area that we live in, there's a lot of first world problems. And if you look at the fact that I think it's 87% of the world doesn't have clean drinking water, and some of the things that we're upset about, um, or going to therapy for, is if you look at it through that lens, it's insane. And so it's very difficult to be depressed if you get up and go down to Dallas Salvation Army and serve people a meal, a hot meal when it's 30 degrees outside, that wouldn't have that meal otherwise. So when you're externally focused and looking at serving other people, it's very difficult to be depressed. Depression is a very egocentric illness. Um, it's a very real thing. It's based in brain chemistry and um, the lack of neurotransmitter and when that gets off in your brain. But also, there's some things we can do. And if you're out serving other people, you're not going to stay depressed generally, right? You're going to look at the fact that, hey, my life's pretty good, and I'm helping other people. I've found meaning or purpose in today, and hey, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to do the same thing, and yeah, I'm going to make the world a better place because I'm in it, rather than expecting and being entitled for everyone to do something for you.
It's one of those things that one of the things that I like to, because when I do this type of stuff, I like to work on, shifting the filters. Like, because you can always find the bad in any day, but if you want, you can find the good in any day as well. And so I think a lot of times what ends up happening is that we get shifted because of the news media, because of social media or whatever, we get shifted into finding the bad things and we just get obsessed with them. And so, like part of the thing I like to talk about for legacy is what have you done for your community? Like,
Mhm.
what do you like once you kind of fix yourself, you get yourself to a point where you're like, okay, I'm functional and stable. As soon as you start going out to the community and helping other people, it really does change things. Like, I was having people, I usually, teach gratitudes and like, just go do gratitudes. Like, look for the things you're grateful for. And people come back in, they're like, man, that's really changed my life. And, now I see the things I'm happy about. And now I can go out and kind of help other people with that stuff too. And it's been really kind of interesting to see people who have started going out and tried to find that thing in the community they can do, whether it's, teach business, whether it's teach, relationship function or teach, you know, exercise or whatever it is that they know how to do. These people come back in and they're just completely changed. Like I had a guy who I was working with and he's done very, very well business wise, great family, the whole thing. And I'm talking to him and I can tell there's something wrong, right? Like it's when you talk to somebody and they're not really there and they're thinking about something else. And I was like, what's going on? I was like, what's bugging you? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, no, come on, I can see that something's wrong. What's going on? He's like, I don't know, man. He's I feel kind of bad because my life is awesome. He's like, I got plenty of money. He's like, my family, I have the best family in the world. And my job's great and this and that. He's like, I just feel like something's missing. And I asked him, and I said, well, what are you doing to give back? He was like, well, I give $10,000 a month to the church. And so, I'm good. I'm like, yeah, but you make enough money that 10 grand a month, while it's a giant amount for a lot of other people, isn't a big thing for you. Like, you're not going to be hurting because of it. And he was like, well, yeah. And I was like, so go, like, so we talked far about it. He started teaching, you know, younger kids entrepreneurship and like business stuff like that. And he comes back in, he was like, hey, He's like, I took your advice. He's like, I'm going to sell my business and I'm going to do this thing over here. And I was like, whoa, I didn't tell you to sell your business. And he was like, yeah. He's like, I've got guys who can run this business and everything will be fine. And he was like, I started going out and serving my community. I started teaching these things and working with these kids. He goes, and that gave me the fulfillment that I've been lacking for the past 10 years. He's like, that filled the void. And he was like, that was really what I do from here on out, because it gave him purpose. Like he had all this purpose to build the business. He built it. And then when he was standing up top, he was like, well, I'm here. What do I do now? And so
Mhm.
like going out in the community and helping people was something that it was a big change for him. And, I've talked to people who that's their thing. They go to the church, they volunteer at the church, they volunteer at the school, they volunteer wherever, helping people, do things. And that's always been the biggest thing for a lot of these people. Peterson was talking about how, the one thing we all have in common is that when you really help somebody and they turn around, they say, thank you, that's really helped me. He was like, the vast majority of people find that that is the most rewarding feeling in the world is to help other people.
Mhm.
And so that's one of those things that, we can sit and flex about our cars and about our vacations and stuff like that. And that just kind of separates us, from each other. But working with people to make their lives better has been really profound at making everybody in the community's lives better. So, volunteering and looking for legacy things, I think is one of the best things that we can do when you're in a position where you're like, I don't know, I'm swirling around and, I guess I'm trying to find reasons to be pissy, and so I guess I'll find this thing. Like I don't have the right car. Well, I guarantee you've got a car that's better than 99% of the world. So go out and give back. That might help
Right.
you out.
Well, to that point, chasing money will make you miserable. Um, yeah, if money buys comfort up to a certain dollar amount. And I want to say 10 or 12 years ago, there was some research done. It was replicated a couple of times. And at some point in time in net income, the happiness flatlines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So up into a certain dollar amount, money actually does buy happiness because why? It can buy you a car instead of walking. It can buy you heat in the sun, in the winter. It can buy you, you know, heat in the winter, right? So you're not outside under a bridge, starving to death, and buys food. And up to a certain amount, it might buy a better cheeseburger rather than, you know, McDonald's cheeseburger, right? Or whatever, right? But at a certain dollar amount, and I want to say, I don't remember exactly, but it was between, I ask people this in my office all the time. They always overshoot. I say, what? I explain all that and I say, what dollar amount do you think it is? And again, we've experienced a little bit of profound inflation. So it's a little higher today than it was 10 years ago. Um, that's another animal. We'll tackle that at a later time. But the dollar amount is less than 70,000 a year in income, right?
Yeah.
People are guessing, especially high earners, they're like, well, I don't know, maybe 500,000 a year. And I'm like, no, it's like $67,000 a year. That up to that point, 67, you'll be happier than if you're making 37, right? But from 67 to infinity, the graph flatlines. Um, and so money does buy happiness up to a certain point, and then money, I work with people that are multimillionaires and people that are living in the poverty at the poverty level, and some of them are absolutely stoked about life and love life, and some of them are miserable. It doesn't matter how much money they make. In addition, you add that if you build your organization to a certain point where it's you've got managers running everything, and you only have to show up in the office from about 10 to 2, like, where's your purpose then, right?
Yeah.
You got this organization that's just you know you know you know just printing cash, and you don't have purpose in your life because you're not growing that anymore. And that's where people get depressed and get into trouble and don't have anything to do with their time. You mentioned gratitude. I have, man, most people that I work with can benefit from journaling. And by journaling, I mean writing down your thoughts and feelings. And I have to say journaling because, I say diary or something like that. I usually say thought log. Men won't do any of that. So I have to just say, write what you're thinking and write what you're feeling. Right. And you can tell I work with probably more women than men, but a large portion of my clients are men. And if they will just write down what they're thinking and feeling. Most men, I say, what are you feeling? And they give me a thought, right? Like, what are you feeling? Well, I feel like it's raining outside today. Well, that's not a feeling, that's a thought. But if we can target the feeling and you externalize that emotion and don't leave it stuck inside you and put it out on paper, you know, arguably even better if you have some form of community that you can talk to. And most men don't have that either. Most men, if they have 3 good friends throughout the course of their life, they're beating the average and doing better than most. Um, most men just work and work and work and then play and a little bit, right? We and we don't have margin and don't take the time that it takes to do that. But the journal, if someone is struggling with gratitude, to start a gratitude journal of what they are grateful for and the good things that happened to them yesterday. And even I have people target like what is the first good thing that's going to happen for you today, right? So why do I do that? Well, because then they're looking for it. They're not looking for everything bad that's going to happen. They're looking for that first good thing. You know, hey, it's a beautiful sunrise, or it's a I've got this breakfast is great, and I've got food on the table. So targeting gratitude and writing about that is huge. And then you have a log to look back on and see all these things that you're grateful for, not all these things that you're, miserable about.
It's also kind of fun to kind of look back at the things that were bothering you 6 months ago, and now
Sure.
you look at them and you're like, man, that resolved itself, or man, that really wasn't as big of a deal as I thought it was at the time. Because then you can like, now I'm going to write down the things I'm worried about today, and sooner or later you go, you know what? Maybe the thing I'm worried about today isn't as big of a deal as I think it is right now. I can kind of take a breath and relax and kind of know that I'm going to get through it. And so the journaling thing is fantastic. And I've been a big fan of journaling for a long time, even though not a whole lot of people do it. So the big thing is that like I think we're in a really weird space now. Um, there's been a lot of women have been better with their emotional function forever. Like
And
they will
they,
tell you
they,
their
were, they, were
emotions.
designed, they were designed that way.
Yes. Yeah. But we're getting into a time where the more and more pressure is being put on men. And I think for a lot of this, it's a good thing to actually kind of recognize that we have stress, we have psychological emotional issues, and to start working through that. Are there any things that like when that have been helping men to kind of overcome the idea that they need to get in and start working with people that you know of? Is there something that people need to hear so that they can start getting in and start counseling and start working with their stuff?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think men, especially successful men, they don't want to take the time to do what it takes to get into a therapy appointment. But also anybody I'm working with, I'm having them do things outside the therapy appointment, right? Because we can only do so much in 45 minutes to an hour here. But if you're doing homework, even if it's 10 minutes a day outside of here, it's going to greatly increase our reach and greatly increase our chances of success. Um, I do believe men have to have a very targeted, direct approach. If I have a man come in, I mean, men, we're fixers, right? We
Yeah.
want a solution, which is part of the problem. And to circle back around to the communication relationships thing, right? A lot of times women just need to talk and talk things out, and they feel even in therapy or with their partner, and they feel much better just by putting it out there and saying this is what's going on at the kids' school, and these preschool moms are acting crazy, and this is terrible. What do we do though? We hear a problem, and what do we do with a problem? We fix. And I think that's probably ingrained in us, for the last, gabillion years, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
part of who we are. So when we try to fix the problem, what do women hear? Women hear, oh, he doesn't want to listen, right? He's just trying to get me to shut up. I mean, this is one of the most common issues with communication. So as men, if we can just listen instead of fix, man, that's 90% of the problem, right? So I understand I answered a question you didn't ask, but I had to put that out there because that's like a personal goal of mine is to teach men how to listen without fixing, because fixing sounds like shut up, you're unimportant, I don't want to listen to you, or I don't care, right? When really in our mind, we're kind of simple, right?
Yeah.
We're pretty simple in a lot of ways, but it's an equation, right? And it's like problem, solution, move on, done. When they don't actually want the solution always, they just need to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but obstacles for men in therapy is cost and time generally, and this idea that they're just going to come in and just talk about the issue and not have any real solutions. What we do here is a very solutions focused approach. It's a lot of times, man or woman, right? I mean, a lot of women benefit from this too. Is that okay? Here's the issue. Here are three things, A, B, and C. These are the three things you're going to do between now and next Monday when you're going to be back in my office at 3 p.m. Right? And if you do these three things, life's going to be better. You're going to be less depressed. You're going to have it's just going to be a better day. It usually takes a couple of weeks to get people off the ground to do homework. Um, a lot of times I'm like, hey, tell me about the journal, man. And what have you been writing about? And they're like, oh, about that journal,
Yeah.
right? So that's the more common thing because it takes about 3 weeks to make a habit. And I'm asking you to do something that's outside of the box from everything you've done for the last 40 years, basically. Um, but being very direct, being very solutions focused, I think that this is a whole nother subject also, but I think the model of therapy is grossly broken,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to young adults and teenage kids. Um, I think we have become a society that enables people who are struggling versus empowering people who are struggling. Um, and let's say, for example, someone comes in and they've lost a parent, right, to cancer, heart disease, or anything like that. That's a terrible thing, right? That's a huge life event to lose a parent at a young age. But if they are coddled and in therapy for the next 3 years every week of their lives, and all we're talking about is how terrible that is and how bad life is, and you got a raw deal and you didn't deserve this, and yeah, I don't we don't deserve anything. Like we're not entitled to anything. So if we take a different approach and empower that person, and it could be an 80-year-old person, it can be an 8-year-old person, um, empower them to like, hey, this is tough, right? You're going through a hard thing right now, and you're 15 and you're going through this grief process. And at 25, you're going to go through a different grief process, and at 50, you're going to go through a different grief process. This is something that will have an impact on you the rest of your life. Um, However, you're from tough stock. You're from a good family. Your parents did hard things. Your grandparents did harder things, right? And all the way back. And it's up to you to rise to the occasion, feel what you're feeling, talk through those feelings, but work through that grief process and take this and figure out how to make yourself a better person, right? Because I do believe we're the sum of everything that happens to us from birth until like this second.
Hmm.
And there's some, there's hard parts about that. There's the grief process is very real, but to work through that appropriately and figure out what good, how can I turn this negative event that's happened to me and make it find some positive in it.
Yeah, there's a school of thought with NLP on the moving to the cause side of the equation. So, instead of sitting there and having things affecting you, all right, what are you going to do about this thing? Like, how are you going to take control and how are you going to move to, now again, you're back in control of what's going on. Yeah, things were bad, but you got to kind of overcome and kind of take over. There's the funny thing is that, when you look at it, it's always funny because I tell this to people a lot. The only person you can change is you. And so if you have a problem, you're going to figure out how you change you to deal with that problem because you can beg, you can beat, you can do whatever you want to somebody else, but you can't force them to change, but you can
Sure.
force you to change.
I see that all the time. I see, I've got the person in my office that's wanting the other person in the relationship to change. And I'm like, well, hey, we got the wrong person in here. So you either need to bring him, it's usually a him, because men don't want to come to therapy, especially relationship counseling. You need to have him in here on the couch with you, or, and I even do this exercise where I'll have them, I'm like, stand up. They're like, well, stand up. I'm, I'm good. I'm like, no, stand up. Put your hands out and do a 360-degree circle. And they're like, okay, this guy's crazy. Like, what's really going on here? I'm like, all right, everything within that circle is what you have control of. Everything outside that circle is absolutely out of your control. So you trying to control things outside of your locus, your area of control is will make you crazy.
Well, that's I think where a lot of anxiety comes from is people trying to control the things they have no ability to control, and then worrying about that lack of control. And so if you can just accept it and be like, well, you know what? You can't control the things that happen to you. This is God, this is said so often. You can't control the things that happen to you, but you can control the way you react to them. And
Oh,
so
absolutely.
if you start recognizing that that's real, like, oh, all right, cool. So, I tell people, look at it as a challenge. Like life's going to throw you challenges. It's going to throw you puzzles. You just figure out how to fix them. Like,
Sure.
that's the thing. So just expect that. And when new problems come up, figure them out. And if you can't figure them out, go talk to somebody who's dealt with this before. That's
Sure.
what the therapy thing is, go talk to someone and figure out how to get through it. That's why, anytime something big happens, those significant emotional events, loss of a family member, the physical issues, the rape issues, go talk to somebody who's dealt with this a lot and they can help you get through it. But you still got to figure out how you're going to get through it. No one's going to get through it for you. And
Sure.
so, those are some of the things that, when people are like, well, go get a therapist. It's like, well, how is talking about this forever going to help? Like you said, well, it depends on who your therapist is. If they give you the abilities to deal with your stuff and change you and get through it, it'll help tremendously. If you're just going to sit and wallow in it for a long time, that's not going to help anybody.
Well, sure. And there's plenty of bad, it's like anything. There's bad cardiologists, there's plenty of bad therapists out there. And so that's why it's very important to, the if you're on the internet, if you're on the Googles, if you're on Psychology Today, pick, man, look at pick 10 that you like their profile. And the main question is, can this person help me get from point A to point B? Um, Completely vet them, look them up on the internet, figure out, read everything you can about them, then narrow it down to 5, then narrow it down to 3. And I don't think it's a crazy idea to pick 3 and set up an initial appointment with 3 clinicians, right? What do you have to lose? Well, you got a little bit of money and a little bit of time to lose. But what you don't want to do is just to pick one off the internet and then you're 8 sessions down the road and you're like, I really don't connect with this person. I don't feel good with this person. And they really just sit here and don't give me any therapeutic recommendations and I'm not getting anywhere. I'm spinning my wheels. Then, it's almost like you're pot committed. It's like,
Yeah.
well, to use a poker analogy, it's like, well, I've gone 8 sessions. I might as well keep going to this one or else I'm going to have to reinvent the wheel. Every clinician is not a good fit for everybody. I am not a good fit for everybody. I'm a great fit for a certain group of people. And, I pride myself on the fact that if I've got somebody in my office and I'm not a good fit, let's just say they have an issue that I don't have a specific area of expertise in, usually that's sorted out at my front office and my front desk before they even hit my office. But at least once a month, I'll say, hey, I'm not the clinician for you, right? I don't. I mean, I understand eating disorders, but I'm not an eating disorder specialist, right? This is not what I do. I need to get you in with um, Allie or Brittany, right? We've got 14 clinicians here now at 2 different offices in Frisco. And we also do a lot of online telehealth. So our reach is way further than the geographic reach here. And while I'm not a good fit for everybody, we've worked for the past 12 years on having someone who's a good fit for everybody. So find read the initial stuff, right? Everybody tells you the best stuff on their bio. But also look at reviews, right? Google reviews or Yelp reviews. If they've got 30 reviews and they've got 4.6 stars, it's kind of like a restaurant. I'm not trying to go to the Thai place that has 2.2 stars out of 5. I'm
Hmm.
looking for 4.2, 4.3 or higher. And that generally means that other people have had positive experiences with that person. Um, but yeah, yeah, set up the admitting there's a problem is the first step. Setting up that initial appointment is the second step, right? And then we've got a lot of paperwork, right? I want to know everything about you before you walk in the office. And part of that's for a reason because a lot of people bail because they don't want to fill out the paperwork. And we really don't want you here if you are not willing to do the work. And so that initial paperwork is kind of a step. Okay, well, they're willing to fill this out. So they're motivated to change. Um, because at the end of the day, not from a selfish standpoint, because I love what I do, right? I generally love getting up and doing this every day, and I've done it for 25 years. But if I've got people that are motivated to change and getting better, man, when I walk out of here, I've got a little skip in my step and I'm feeling great. If I've got people that are just circling the drain and doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, I mean, that's not fun for me. My life is fun. I love
Yeah.
life and I want to make an impact and a difference. And I want people getting better. And that's our general focus or mission statement here at Frisco Counseling and Wellness.
That's the same thing with what I do. The people who come in and they've got a reason why they can't do everything. Well, I can't go to the gym for these reasons. I can't eat like that for
Oh,
these reasons. Like,
oh,
yeah, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, why don't you go try to figure it out somewhere else? Like, but the people who are in here are like, like they hit me on the app, like, once a day or 3 times a week, like, hey, I did this and that, and you can tell that they're really working at it. And a month in, they've started to see change and they start loving it. That's what makes it worthwhile for me as well. So, I feel you on that one. I will also say that we had my oldest had a really really terrible teacher experience, and we got him in with Allie, and that I think helped tremendously. So, and he was, God, how old was he? Was kindergarten, first grade at the time, and it was really interesting to me because I would talk to Zane afterwards about the stuff, and he would tell me kind of what they did, and it was really interesting to see that, like, while it was helping him, he didn't recognize, because he's a kid, like what all was going on. But it was really interesting to see him kind of come through that. And so, like
sure.
you said, like, somebody different for each issue. And so,
Yeah, I'm not the guy for a first grader, right?
no,
I'm a 13, 14 and up guy, right? Generally,
yeah,
um, I just don't have that skill set, or maybe patience, or I started having my own kids. I'm like, man, I want to be so happy to see them when I get home. I don't want to work with 8 year olds, 10 year olds, and I just don't have the training for that. But somebody like Allie or Holly, and that's their wheelhouse, and
yeah.
that's what you want to be with a clinician that crushes it with the exact area that you're needing help on, because at the end of the day, like we're just a coach. There's nothing magical about this process. A lot of it is common sense. We point people in the right direction, and what they need is someone that has a greater level of understanding than themselves about the brain chemistry of depression, or what helps, what doesn't help, but also someone that's on the outside looking in, because man, we've all got our blind spots, right? Just look at parenting, right? I've got blind spots that other people can see, and they're like, hey, that was really stupid, like what you did, and that didn't make sense, and how's that working for you? And I'm like, oh yeah, actually it's not. I thought I was A plus parent here, and that was a B minus move, right?
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
see it because you're on the inside of it. So there's value in having someone on the outside looking in that can look at things rationally and logically, unemotionally, right? They're not emotionally tied to things, and so they can see it much more clearly.
One of the things I talk to parents about all the time is, what vertical you're in. And so, it's funny because people come in all the time, and like, I'll tell some kid, you need to eat like this or drink more water or whatever, lift like this. And they're like, oh, great. Yeah, I'll start doing that. That sounds like a great idea. And the parents, like, just like, I've been saying this for 2 years. And I'm like, you have to understand, you're in a very, very specific vertical. Like, you're there for, as an example and for love and for this. But after a certain point, You need somebody else to tell your kids to do these things because they're trying to become their own person.
100%. Yeah. I use that example at least twice a week. Of my oldest was in baseball, coach pitch or something, and we were at the batting cages, and I'm telling him, I don't remember what it was. Drop your right elbow. I mean, he was missing the ball. He was whiffing. I want to say he was like 10, 11, 12, probably 10, 11. And then I went over to the other coach, who's a buddy of mine. I said, "Hey, would you go tell him to drop his elbow and put his hands together and move his wrist a little bit?" And he did it, and he starts stroking the ball, right? And I'm like, first I had to get out of my own feelings. I'm like, bruh, I said that 18 times in the last 5 minutes, and you did nothing. And this guy says it, but yeah, we're parents, especially at that age, especially as they get older, hormones start going. We don't know anything. Like we've lived no
Yeah.
life, we have no life experience, and our IQ. I tell parents, your IQ takes a nosedive, drastic nosedive at about 12 or 13. Your kids 12, 13. And if you don't believe me, ask your kid, they'll tell you, right? And it doesn't rebound. I'm like, hey, your IQ will come back up, but it doesn't rebound until generally they're a freshman in college and trying to figure out how to make spaghetti, hamburger helper, I don't know, something that college kids,
Yep.
ramen, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're like, oh, I don't know how to boil water. What am I doing here? I think I better call mom. Usually they call mom on that deal.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, then they get married and start having kids, and then of course, when it comes to babies, mom's IQ rebounds significantly. Finance, IRAs. Hey, my recent one was, hey, what's the difference in a SEP and a Roth? I'm like, all right, here we go. Buckle up. Let's go. So yeah, that's when it gets fun. My oldest is now 20, my middle is 17, my youngest is 15. So, there is hope. They will listen. If you're consistent with them through that development process and they know you're someone that is there for them and loves them and you've built that bond with them, your IQ comes back. They'll actually ask your opinion on things, and then it gets fun. And then maybe they do it and then maybe they don't.
Yeah. Well, it's what I think is hilarious is that so Zane was working with one of my NFL buddies, uh, on being a center and moving around stuff like that, and Zane starts asking him all these nutrition questions and exercise questions and stuff like that, and Nate looks at him and he goes, "Hey," he's like, "You know who I ask when I have questions like that?" And Zane goes, "No, who?" And he goes, "Your dad." And he was like, "What?" And he's like, "That's how we know each other." And he's like, he helps me with all that stuff, and he was just like, oh my gosh, like it's hilarious to me that like
Mind
he had
blown.
mind blown that
Yeah.
like that I have a purpose outside of wrestling with him and telling him to eat stuff. So you know it is kind of funny the way that these kids roll with it. But I will say that it's one of those things that knowing how important the psychological function is, the development is, um, having you guys there to help us out was really, really important. And it's one of those things I tell people all the time. I'm like, you know, your kid, it's not like I can find an easy reason why your kids need a mentor or a coach or a therapist. Bring me any kid, any 8 to 20-year-old, and I'll be like, here's the easy things off the top. And people and the parents are always like, well, I've taught them better. And I'm like, you've given them the example. You're gonna have to have somebody else kind of move them through. This is the whole like takes a village type of idea. Like
Sure.
I said, you occupy a very important vertical. You need a professional to kind of help them with the rest of the stuff. So, I'd like to see more and more kiddos because like I'll do some mentor stuff with kids, especially young people who are just getting married, and you walk them through things and they're just like, oh, I never thought of that. And I'm like, you should have thought of that day one. Like again,
Yeah.
this is one of those things I think that if we could teach kids when they're 16, 17, interpersonal communication and purpose in life and stuff like that, it would make our relationships later a lot better because these kids just don't. I don't know if it's like you said, like we're missing kind of that male group, that male friend group that the younger boys can kind of walk into and kind of sit and listen to and be kind of educated from that type of thing. But I really feel like a lot of these kiddos, and I'll take the 25-year-olds as kiddos too. I have all these NFL athletes I refer to as kids because they're 25.
Oh, right.
But getting that secondary communication, getting somebody who's like yourself who's set up to kind of ask the right questions and kind of point them in the right direction, let them figure it out on their own. But from a educated, here are the potholes that are coming for you. Like, let's start walking through these ahead of time. I think is one of the things, the most important things that you can do for the development of a young adult is, we talk about their nutrition, we talk about their exercise, we talk about, learning their math and or their geography. But we're not doing anything to teach these kids psychological function, emotional communication, like any of that type of
Sure.
stuff. And I think that's the number one thing we're going to need, because as you start looking at all the AI and all the robots and stuff that's coming, like the people who can talk to other human beings, the people who can communicate and be part of a team are going to be the ones that are going to be matter the most. And so I think a lot of that comes from psychological development. And so, if we're not having great coaches to help our kids out, I think we're doing a massive disservice to them. I mean, you'll spend thousands of dollars to teach them to hit a baseball. How are you teaching them to communicate with other human beings? Like,
Sure.
I mean,
Well,
we need to focus on that.
it's all about emotional intelligence, which interestingly enough is more prognostically indicative of success in life than actual intelligence. There's a great book by Daniel Goleman called Emotional Intelligence. I think everyone should read it. And the great thing about emotional intelligence is that it can be taught, right?
Yes.
IQ remains constant over time through all life stages within about 4 IQ points. Emotional intelligence is actually something that you can learn. So if you are inept at that and terrible at relationships with other humans, you can actually learn to do better. And then when you know how to do better, you can do better and have greater success. In you know, unfortunately, most schools they're teaching to a test because they get money from the government based on how well their kids do on these tests, and emotional intelligence is not on the test, right? Geography and trig are, um, and so therefore, I feel for teachers these days because it's they're under the gun for these kids to perform. When actually, I think back, if you look back 50 years ago, there were a lot. The skill set being taught in schools was much different than it is today, and I think you see that in our generation versus the generation that's getting pumped out into the world today. You hit a nerve I've got to address. If you're going to go to premarital counseling, it's a very worthwhile process. Don't go 3 weeks before the wedding, right? When gifts are already piling up and invitations are out, and we've already paid the DJ and the caterer and everything else. Go before you even get engaged, right? And this sounds like crazy talk, but like go during, somewhere. I mean, you're not going to go after 3 dates, right? We got 3 hinge dates, and you're asking this person to go to relationship counseling. That's going to scare them off faster than just about anything. But go early, right? Because we use an instrument called Prepare, right? And Prepare, they get an email. Each uh, partner gets an email. It takes them about 45 minutes. They fill out a bunch of questions, and then I get 24 pages of feedback on them as a couple on 12 different parameters: money, sex, kids, extended family, um, leisure activities, like even like what you like to do with your spare time. Like if one of you likes to stay inside and play video games, the other one likes to go hiking, like we're gonna have to figure something out here, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably not a portable game console. Um, but yeah, do that early because you're seeing what the roadblocks are or the speed bumps are before you get in the relationship, right? Most people don't want to bring it up, and then I get them. I mean, 3 weeks. I've gotten 3 weeks, yes, but like generally, it's about 2 months before the wedding, and at that point, it's too late. Again, you're pot
Yeah.
committed. The invitations are out. Like, but also to that point, one of the worst things you can do if you figure out it's a bad fit, and I will tell couples, like this is a bad fit. You guys are going to have to do a significant amount of work to make this work. All marriages are a significant amount of work, but like you guys are going to have to figure out some really, whether it's differing faith orientations or religious beliefs, or like this is going to be really hard. And yeah, one of the worst things you can do is like, oh, the invitation's already out. Let's go. We're going to do this thing. And then we've got a mess on our hands. So do
Yeah.
that work, do the investigative work early with a qualified professional that can find what those blind spots are and identify the issues. Um, it's very, very important.
See, I'm a bigger fan of backing up even before that. Like when I see a lot of people, they get married, they don't know who they are, let alone how they're going to react in a marriage. And then 5 years later, they figure out who they are, and they're like, "Oh, this is not the right match for me." I'm like, sit down and do this self investigation. Who are you? What makes you tick? What do you enjoy? Like go through that prepare questionnaire for yourself, figure out who you are and where you want to
Sure.
go, then find somebody who's on that same path with you. That's gonna be a much better match for you. You guys have a much easier time staying together than just, hey, I've met some cool chick in a bar and, we're going to try to make it work. We don't know anything about each other really or anything about ourselves. So, that would be, the getting together earlier, I think is really important. Lou and I did the premarital thing when we were getting married, and the funny thing was is that uh, we matched really well. And when
Mhm.
we went to counseling, it was kind of one of those deals where like, well, here's the problems. And we're like, oh, we've already talked about that. And they're like, what? But it was so shocking to me that like they were like, well, we're gonna talk about kids next week. And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, how many kids do you guys want to have? And I'm like, well, we had the conversation. She wants four. I want two. We're gonna have two and figure out how we go from there. I'm like, do people not talk about this? And she was like, no, nobody
The
talks
answer,
about
the
this.
answer is no. The answer is no. Yes.
I was shocked at how little people actually talk about the things that are obviously important.
Well, if you look at especially the younger generation, the amount of time that there's a phone in their hand, that they're, the hours a day that they have this external stimulus of the phone, and it's generally in I'm probably say the wrong amount of time, but like a 30-second reel,
Mm-hmm.
which creates a very, humans and young adults with a very short attention span. And we can't even have an extended conversation because we're used to scrolling, or even like commercials on TV. They're 30 seconds, right? It's difficult to have a intentional, deep conversation when you're not even used to digesting anything over 30 seconds at a time.
Well, so let me do this because I could talk to you about this is one of my favorite topics. I could talk to you about this for days. But who are the people that should be, and I'm a big fan of saying everybody, but who would you say the people that you really need to kind of call you guys and get set up, within the new year and stuff like that? Is there something like if you're struggling with X, Y, and Z, give me a call? Is there something specific like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the easy answer is everybody, but I really don't believe everybody needs counseling. A lot of this, some of it's common sense, and you can figure this out on your own. I'm going to say everybody, and if you have blind spots, right, spend one or two, three sessions. That I do that pretty frequently, and I'm like, hey, we've talked about these things. You've got your marching orders. You've got a treatment plan. Like, I don't want to see you for another month, or you're going off to college. Come back at spring break when you're back in town, and do these things until then. Then we'll reevaluate, right? So it's very frequent that I tell somebody, hey, I have to do it delicately because when I first started doing this, I had people who were like, "Oh, you don't want to work with me. You don't like me. You don't think you can help me." And I'm like, "No, it's not that. Like your time is valuable, my time's valuable, and your money's valuable, right? So why waste any of those? And if we can do things, this is how we're a little different. If we can do things every other week, I don't want to see you every week, right? And if we can do things on a once a month basis, you don't need to be coming every week. It's wasteful. There's more important avenues to invest your financial resources and your time. But our goal here, I told you we had, I think 14 clinicians now. Our goal is to have someone for everyone, and our office manager is highly trained to spend 3 or 4 or 5 minutes on a phone call and know who the best fit for that person is, right? So, I mean, the easy answer is everybody. We got someone for everyone. But if to get through that filter and get to the right person, and sometimes that filter is I need appointments on Saturdays, for my kid. My kid's already missed 8 days of school. he had the flu, this, that, and the other, and we can't take off during the week or evening appointments, right? There's a certain number of clinicians here that do those things. Some of it is a price point or fee level, right? We have all different fee levels here based on experience and expertise, right? So if someone says this is too much for me, especially if I'm going to look at doing for my daughter the next 3 months every week and see if we can knock this thing out and get some resolution. That's too much for me. Okay, well we've got someone that's at a lesser price point, right? Um, and it's interesting. I do have a kind of a belief that you learn a lot in school in graduate school to become a counselor, but a lot of it you either have or you don't, right? And
Hmm.
so I've had some counselors. There's a associate program and an intern program before that where they're underneath a licensed supervisor, right? And I've got, I've seen counselors that come out of school with a greater skill set. They can just talk to humans. They can identify things and figure out how to get from point A to point B than clinicians that have been doing this for 10 years. So don't be scared off if the clinician is technically an LPC, a licensed professional counselor associate, because they may be able to help you and it will cost you less money than seeing someone that's fully licensed and gone through that 3,000 hour associate process. So, me specifically, I said earlier, I work with a lot of couples on relationship issues, um, see a lot of depression, a lot of bipolar disorder, supportive therapy for family members of patients struggling with bipolar disorder, and a lot of teenage kids, 25 and under kids, right? Where it's like, and generally that's the parents coming in and saying, hey, my kid is not behaving how I've raised them to behave, and fix my kid. Interestingly, a lot of times it's a kid issue, but it's also a parental issue. And if we work with the whole family generally, and I'll like, okay, I'm going to work with your 16-year-old, but I need you guys to work on some co-parenting issues with Holly for 3 sessions. And it's amazing what we can get done when we change the structure and we change the paradigm of how the child is being parented. And if we can switch that, even just incrementally, we see the kids succeed and start figuring things out on their own. Because again, we are a society who enables kids rather than empowering kids. We don't want our kids to do without. We don't want to tell them no. One of the worst thing I know we got to close this down. I'm ranting here, but like one of the worst things we can do is your kid makes a mistake. You apply some form of corrective discipline of like, hey, you're not going to have your phone for a week. What do most parents do? The kid needs the phone. They start whining. They're going to a friend's house. They need to communicate with a friend. Now it's homework because everything's electronic. Well, I need my phone for homework. You give the phone back in 2 days, right? Don't tell them a week. Just pick something else if you can't follow through with it, right?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Well, so that's that's kind of what I was hoping that we could figure out, kind of as people are kind of walking through this, and everybody understands that mental health is important, but they don't really know where to start. That's the thing I was kind of hoping we could touch on. So I'm glad that, hopefully enough people will see this and be like, oh, I'm not doing anything for my mental health. Maybe I should go take a couple sessions and figure out, some homework that I could do for me to make my life easier, better, or, learn to communicate a little bit better. So, and I love the fact that, when you're like, hey, go read this book, like the information's in this book. If you'll go get the book and read it, you'll be a lot further off. So that's pretty spectacular. So, you guys are Frisco Counseling and Wellness. You guys also do virtual stuff, right?
We do a lot of virtual. About 30% of what we do is virtual. And that started during COVID. And actually, I lived outside the country for a couple of years. And um, so I was doing telehealth before telehealth was cool. And it can be very effective. It's very effective for some and not effective for some. I've got some people that I'm like, hey, we need to get you scheduled for this week. And they're like, well, I absolutely want to come to the office. And if you absolutely want to come to the office, you should, right? Because um, it's kind of like there's two kinds of people, and a lot of professionals that are doing Zoom meetings all day. It's second nature to them to do a Zoom meeting, right? And it's like they're looking at it. Let's say their office is in Fort Worth. They're looking at 45-minute drive to get here, an hour here, 45 minutes back. Like that's 3 hours of your day. And to a large degree, time is money, depending on what you do, but mostly for everybody. Um, and so, especially for executives, telehealth can be very helpful. They can jump in their office, shut the door, tell their admin to not bother them for the next hour, and then they're back at it an hour later, right? So yeah, we do a lot of telehealth, and all our offices are here in Frisco, and yeah, man, this has been fun. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So we'll post this up and hopefully we can get some people, moving down the road and getting better mental health. So we'll
That's the goal.
all right, man. Well, we'll chat later. Thank you so much for being on, helping us out.
All right, thanks, sir.
Absolutely, man. Have a good day.
Bye.